Ready?
All right, hello and welcome. I'm Chef Allie and we are here at the Spanish Fork Library to wish you a very happy holidays and a wonderful new year. And we're so excited because today is very simple, very quick and easy, but as you know, when it's around this holiday season, we really do crave some goodies. And there's a myriad of goodies you can make. This time I thought I would do something a little more on the confection end, and as you know, Chef Allie does not use refined sugar or refined flour, so everything here today is going to be either natural sugar or sugar-free, and is going to have whole grains. And that is the way that I celebrate my holidays, and I don't feel nearly as bad about it, let me tell you. I can still indulge myself and feel good about it. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna start with is a peppermint caramel. And I don't know about you guys, but I really love peppermint flavored things. I love grasshopper brownies, I love mint caramels, all kinds of things like that. So that is what we're gonna start out with. Now, when we're doing sweets, so when I do savory, I always shoot from the hip because it's more about the principle for me. And then people just flavor it as they want to. They have certain preferences for certain flavors, and so maybe they want to add more garlic, or maybe, this or that and the other. But, let's see, don't want to burn the house down. Okay. But, with sweets and baking, you have to be a little more precise in your measurements because what we're doing here is chemistry. And so if you want it to turn out right, you have to measure. Things you don't have to measure on are things like flavoring, like vanilla flavoring, or that pinch of salt or something like that. Well, that's not even true. In some cases, like in ice cream, you do kind of have to measure that because alcohol content, which is in the flavoring, does affect its freezing point and whether or not it'll freeze well. So sometimes you even measure that, but most of the time, you can, on the flavorings, you can play around with them, but with the fundamental things like the fats, the sugars, the main ingredients, you kind of have to measure it out. So the first thing we're going to put in here is a half a cup of agave. Now, does anyone know, or can anyone tell me what an invert sugar is? Anyone know what an invert sugar is? No? It's basically a sugar that has changed molecularly so that it will not go back to its crystal form anytime soon. And that's pretty good because most sugars in their crystalline form will return to that crystalline form pretty quickly unless you get it to a certain boiling point, or unless you have another structure with it, like some kind of starch or some kind of stabilizer or an invert sugar. Like, there's lots of different kinds. There's corn syrup. You can make your own with sugar if you bring it to the right temperature for long enough.
Is honey in there?
Honey is not quite, it kind of is, but not fully because it will go back to crystalline form after sitting on the shelf for a while. But agave is an invert sugar. And so I like to use it for my caramels and things like that because it has a very silky smooth texture and it's not going to go back on you. So we have half a cup of agave in here, and then we are doing just over half a cup of cream for this. And when I say just over, what I mean is, so you get to your half a cup and you get it right between your 3/4 a cup. So a little bit over, about like that. And into the pot it goes. Now, when you are using refined sugar, you never want to agitate your caramel, and you add warm cream at the end and stuff like that. So you actually just put your water in, you put your sugar in, and you leave it. Sometimes you just wet down the sides a little bit so those crystals don't start forming. You bring it to an exact temperature, and then at the very end, you take it off the heat, and you add your hot cream, and you add your vanilla. But with this, you can do it all in one pot, and you do keep an eye on it, and you do stir the bottom. And you don't have to worry about letting it alone because, as I said, it's not going to go back to crystals. So what we are trying to be careful of is that it doesn't burn on the bottom. So we have half a cup agave, half a cup of, just over a half a cup of cream. We want our pinch of salt. And let me tell you, in caramel, you can be a little generous with the salt because it really makes the flavor pop. Okay. And then we want 1.5 teaspoons vanilla. Now, for me, whenever I do vanilla, I usually just like dump it in because I love vanilla. I especially love Mexican vanilla. It's so like round and creamy. But for our sake here today, so that we can all be kosher and you can get the right flavor, we're going to do 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla. I'm going to use my liquid measure. This little handy thing, it looks like a shot glass. That's what my boys pretend it is. They like put Martinelli's and they're like, bottoms up. All right. So we have 1.5 teaspoons. Here's my teaspoon side. Lovely, lovely. And then we have 1/2 teaspoon mint extract. Now, most recipes will say add your flavoring at the end because some of it is going to come out with the alcohol and you're going to lose some of it. It's a negligible amount that you're going to lose. I'll just tell you right now. And I don't want to bother to do that. I want to put everything in one pot, boil it, and be done with it. So that's my philosophy on that. Now, there are some things in which, because of the alcohol content, you do need to add it at the end because of a chemical component. This is not one of those things, so it doesn't matter. I'm going to turn that down just a titch. So here we have 1/2 teaspoon mint extract, and this I'm going to use my spoon to be very precise with, because you can overdo it on the mint. You really can. And then you've got like toothpaste. All right, and then lastly, we want a teaspoon of butter. So we're just gonna bring that to a boil. And if you were at my last class, I think we talked about caramelizing things, and how you know that your caramel is starting to get to its nice thick point is because the bubbles are going to get larger and farther apart and slower. So if you could see this right now, I wish you could see. You can't really see. But if you look in this pot, you'll see lots of little tiny bubbles. And they're going really fast and there's foaming. And that's how you know there's still a lot of water content in there and we haven't nearly reached the viscosity that we're looking for. So let's put in our butter while we are chatting it up. That's about a teaspoon. Sure, yeah, that's a ticket. Why not? And in it goes. Now, we're simmering away beautifully here. It's looking good. And just every once in a while on this recipe, you just kind of want to skim the bottom with the tip of your spatula so that you don't get some burning on the bottom, because there's a lot of fructose in agave and fructose burns easily. So watch out for that. Isn't it funny how all of these different components have these different properties, and there's so much interesting chemistry involved. All right. Oh, you know what? Why don't you come up and take a look into this pot, because I really want you to see what it looks like. See that? All those little tiny bubbles coming up? Smell it.
They need to get big and...
They need to get big and slow. And so it looks more like a tar pit. Big bubbles right into the top of it. And then, you know. So we're going to let that boil. Beautiful. And in the meanwhile, we're going to grab our little tiny pot and we're going to start warming up some cream and butter and flavoring for our truffles. And the way we're going to do this is you put your the method is you put your chocolate in a bowl and you heat up the cream. Now, a lot of people do where they put in cream, they put in chocolate in the microwave and they just put it on like that. you can't really control that outcome very well, and it's a little iffy. Sometimes it foams over, sometimes it goes too far, and your chocolate binds and it overcooks. So the best way to do any kind of ganache or truffle is to put your chocolate in the bowl, warm the cream. So that's what we're going to do in this other pot while we have our caramel going. Ooh, it's starting to foam up. Okay, we're reaching a second stage here in the caramel where the bubbles start to foam across the board and they want to lift all the way to the top of the pot. Now, if you have to walk away from this and, you know, maybe you're listening to Andy Williams and you've got to groove for a second, then you want to just leave your instrument on the top like that, and it'll come up and break the bubbles in the middle, and they'll fall in on themselves and go back down in the pot. So it'll be less likely for it to foam over to the outside of the pot. All right, so truffles. We got a half a cup cream.
Is that true of all boiling over, or is that just this?
Most boiling over. Yeah.
Like when you're doing spaghetti noodles, that's when ours always boils.
Yeah, you know what I do for spaghetti noodles too, because it's so imperative that it comes back up to a boil rapidly. And nobody has, like, I don't know if you've seen back in the day, Julia Child, she showed an episode of how to get your pot hot again. And they have these big cast iron, like, plungers that they heat up until they're red, red hot. And then you get your pot in, and then you put your pasta or your beans, and then you put your red hot plunger into the pot to get it to boil again. Ain't nobody gonna do that at home, right? So what I do is I put my lid back on the pot, but askance.
Oh.
So I just kind of like tip the lid and put it a little off so that it comes up, but it doesn't boil over. Yeah. And okay, so now, as you see in the second stage, we have, it's still very like watery, and it's foamed up here. Now I'm gonna just go up along the bottom, make sure I'm not getting in any burn points. And a lot of this does depend on your stove and the pot that you're using. If you don't have a nice heavy duty pot with like a copper plate in the bottom, it won't heat very evenly, and you'll find that some sides of the pot are getting hotter and other sides are cooler, and there'll be like a little burn spot. And one way you can avoid that, if that happens to you a lot, is number one, make sure your pot is like squarely on the flame or on the burner, like, and not half off and half on. And then number two, just make sure that you just give it that little stir, scraping the bottom every once in a while. So that's what we've done. Okay, back to our meanwhile. Dun, 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 dun. Our cream, half a cup of cream going into the little pot. All right. Now we're putting all of our flavor into this little pot. So the flavoring that we're going with on our truffles is orange. I don't know about you, but I love orange chocolate. Ever since I was a kid, those like oranges that you crack and then the little pieces come on, you know, I loved those so much. And so I really enjoy orange chocolate, especially around the holidays. And that's what we're gonna do with our truffles. So we have half cup cream. We have teaspoon vanilla, which is easily done in the cap. We have some orange flavoring, and we're going a whole 1.5 teaspoons on the orange flavoring. So generous on the orange.
Would this work with other flavoring as well?
Yes.
Same amount, you would say?
It depends. It depends on the quality of your flavoring. It depends on what flavoring it is. For instance, if you wanted to do peppermint, you would not put 1.5 teaspoons of that in there, or you'd be sorry. It'd be chocolate toothpaste. But yes, you can add any flavorings that you want to this recipe. Okay, now the thing that really brings it home is you're going to have a tablespoon of agave, which is, I'm going to use my liquid again. I love this little thing. I use it so often. It's like my friend. Hello, friend. Tablespoon. And then we're gonna put orange peel. And I have found that as much natural flavoring as you can put into your confections, the better. Because they just turn out so much nicer and they have such a more pleasant and intense flavor when you bring the actual thing into the picture. So instead of just putting the orange flavoring, we're also gonna put orange peel. Okay, our caramel is starting to thicken. Come up and see. I want you to see how the bubbles are spreading out and getting bigger. And you can just tell it's going more slowly. It looks more viscous. It looks a little more like a tar pit. There's still a lot of water in there, but we can see that it's coming along and we're about to be successful. That is great. Just how we need it. And so far, no burns on the bottom. Yay, huzzah, hooray. All right. Now, I have this little handy dandy zester. And I'm gonna just zest some orange in here. The other thing you can do that is super, super simple, especially something like this, because we're gonna strain it out anyway, is you can just take a vegetable peeler and just do big fat peels. Just go roop, 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 and put your orange peel in there. And it's
I just use
perfectly
a
fine.
cheese grater.
Or a cheese grater, yes. Or even if you have a paring knife, you don't have any of those things, but you have a little paring knife, you just very thinly skim the top of the orange, making sure not to get the pulp and just to get the peel. And the reason is because in the peel is located, in all those little pores and all those little dimples, the essential oil of the orange. And that's where the flavor is. So, okay, excellent. That's gonna give us some lovely flavor. Now, the reason I am not putting orange juice in there is because water and chocolate don't mix, as you may have noticed if you've ever done anything with chocolate. So you want to reduce any kind of water content as much as possible. So you're going to use full fat cream, like as fatty as you can. And alcohol, as you know, evaporates and doesn't have a high water content. It's just like vapor, especially as it heats. So, and then the peel is mostly dry, so, and oil. It has a lot of oils in it. So you're okay. So fats and fats are okay. Okay, now, here we are getting with the caramel. Oh, this lovely consistency. It's about to get to the point where we're ready for it. So, we're going to get a pan out, coated with parchment.
Could you use one of those silicone mats?
Yes, we can. Yes. Silicone mats are fine for any kind of candy making, especially if you're going to do actual like sugar work. When I do sugar work, because I don't use any refined sugar, I use isomalt, and it's very similar properties to sugar. Oh, good. Okay, we're going to turn this on low because we've got that nice and warm. Okay, so it's getting to the point. Now, there are lots of ways to test this. You can use a candy thermometer and get exact temperatures, but a lot of people don't want to deal with that, or maybe they don't have that at home, or they don't know what the right temperature is for agave, for instance. And that's totally fine, because what we can do is the old-fashioned thing that your grandma did, which is that you're going to test it in some water. Because as soon as the water's going to cool it down immediately and tell you what the texture of that caramel is. And we want to get it to a firm softball stage. Firm softball is where it's still pliable, so it's like, you know, it's like you can bite into it and it has chew, but it's firm enough that it doesn't dissipate in the water and spread out. It stays in a little ball, so it's like nice gummy caramel. Okay, so let's do an initial test. I'm going to say this is not ready. Why? Because it's spreading out and it's already dissolving in my water. So it's not quite ready, but we're almost there. This is where you have to watch it because you don't want any burns. So as I'm stirring this, I'm noticing that when I pull my spatula through, there's like kind of a hang time before the caramel comes in on itself in the center. And I want like a 3-second hang time. Right now it's about a 1 second hang time. So I'm stirring around. Maybe you can see it's gotten a lot thicker. And basically, we've gotten rid of the water. We've cooked the sugars. They are creating chains, making our caramel just the way we need it to be. And at this point, I definitely want to keep scraping the bottom. Okay, I'm pulling my spatula through now, and it's about 1, 2. Okay? If anyone wants to see that, you're welcome to come up and take a look at what that looks like. And that way, when you're at home, you'll know what to look for.
Sure smells good.
When it gets to 3.
Okay, watch this. 1, 2. 1, 2. Okay. Okay, we're gonna test it again in our water, just for funsies, so you can see the evolution. All right, and it's still very, very soft. It's forming a ball now, but it's just very, very soft. It'll be more like just melt in your tongue, you know? No chew to it.
So like a sauce, a caramel sauce?
Caramel sauce, yeah, it would be perfect for ice cream. And in fact, this is an excellent recipe for ice cream. Just increase your cream just a titch, and don't boil it as long. And you've got caramel sauce for ice cream. Works every time. Okay, now I drag it through. It's 1, 2.5. Ah! Come on, caramel, do your thing. And at this point, you do not want to walk away from this caramel. You're like, it's kind of like a custard where you're here for the duration. Don't walk away from the stove. Don't get distracted. Even if it's Frank Sinatra. Alright. So I'm dragging through now. Ooh, it's so close. So we're going to test it again. Okay, we are so close. Okay, we are almost there. So I'm just going to stir it a couple more times. And
So what does the thing look like now?
okay, so come take a look. You can see that the bubbles are really big and just like the tar pits. That's what it looks like. And here's the scrape.
Yeah.
See that?
I see that.
Okay. So now the next step is we are going to just take little bits of it and pour them in little puddles onto the tray. And what's going to happen is they're going to cool and they're going to harden, and they'll be hard enough for us to wrap them in these cute little packages. And it's just parchment that I've cut into squares. It's so easy. I always use parchment when I bake or even when I cook at home. I just get giant spools of it, either online or from Costco, and I just use it all the time. It always turns out better than any pan spray or anything. It just turns out better. Silpats are great. I just don't like to wash them. I'm lazy. Okay, so here we go. So we're just gonna put a little portion, and the reason why I am separating them like this, I could just dump the whole thing and then cut it, but this just makes it easier and a little cleaner to deal with when you're finally ready to wrap the caramels.
I've seen these like at the checkout stands at the grocery stores.
Yes,
In the
yes.
parchment paper and everything.
Uh-huh. And it's the easiest thing in the world. There's no reason why you have to pay any premium price for a gourmet caramel. Make it yourself and charge other people a premium price. Yeah.
Can you pour it over popcorn?
You can, but it will be chewy and soft.
So it won't melt in your mouth like caramel corn.
It will be a chewy type caramel corn and not a crunchy one. So yeah, I mean, it'll still be pleasant and chewy and nice, but it won't be crisp and crunchy like the kind that you put back in the oven.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's good enough for Jazz. That's plenty of caramel. Let's turn this off. Voila. And we'll set this over here for now. Okay, and meanwhile, our cream is all heated up. So, let's make some truffle. 8 ounces of chocolate. 8 ounces. This bag happens to be 8 ounces. But if you don't have a bag that says 8 ounces on it, you need this handy dandy little fella. I have to use this all the time because in most professional recipes, there are no cups, there are no teaspoons. It's all in weights. Everything is in weights because you can be more precise in weights. So it's either going to be in ounces or it's going to be in grams. And sometimes you have to do conversions depending on if you want it in grams or ounces or what. But that's why I have one of these. And this one is really simple to use. I got it on Amazon. It's cheap. And here we have, this says 8.08 ounces. And part of that is the packaging. So what you want to do, if you want to be super precise, you stick your bowl on your weight and then you press tear. Tear is going to zero it out. So it's as if the bowl does not weigh anything.
Oh.
And that way you can very precisely weigh your chocolate in the bowl. So, I didn't realize I had to go to the gym to order a package of chocolate. Actually, that's a really good idea. Because then you paid for your chocolate that you're about to eat by going to the gym. Okay, so there we go. Now that's 8.01 ounces. That's fine. I don't worry about, if it's like 0.01, don't worry about that. It's not going to affect the recipe. All right, so let's just make sure that we have this nice and
is that only the cream again?
it is a cream, vanilla,
Oh.
agave, orange flavoring, and orange peel. Okay, so this is all of our flavor. Now, all we're gonna do here is simply set that up and just wanna make sure that this is boiling before I put it in there because you do want it nice and hot. Because this is a component that's going to melt our chocolate. So, turn it up to max. Hello.
So you don't put the chocolate in there?
No. And especially if you are not used to working with chocolate, because chocolate is very temperamental and it burns easily and it has all these issues. There's tempering and all of these like number 4 and 5 crystals that form in the chocolate. It's very complicated. So like real chocolatiers who devote their life to it are alchemists. They are amazing and they know every little detail about chocolate. And they know all about the fat content and how that affects things and blah, blah, blah. And most of us are not going to make a study of that, right? Do you want to go to school for 4 years about chocolate? No, right? So, it's just easier to do some fail-safe practices. And one of those fail-safe practices is never put your chocolate in a pot on the direct heat. Just don't. Either put it in a double boiler or heat up your cream and have that melt the chocolate, because 9 times out of 10, you'll end up accidentally burning or destroying your chocolate. Okay. So, we have strained the peel, and we're just going to mix this into the hot cream. And it starts out, you're thinking, gosh, this isn't coming together, because as you can see,
Yeah.
what the heck? What's happening to my chocolate, man? It doesn't look good. But then, you just keep stirring it, work with it, and it starts to get all glossy and smooth and delicious. And suddenly you're like, can I eat this with a spoon? Now you want to just keep stirring that until all the lumps are out. And as you can see, there's still lumps in there. See that? So I would just continue to stir, continue to stir, continue to stir. Now, I'm not going to take up your time by continuing to stir because I have some already made. Ding!
So that's it? That's the end of it?
That's it. And then you just let it sit until it hardens, or you put it in the fridge and let it harden. And then what you're going to do with it is you're going to make these awesome truffles. There are a million things you can top your truffles with, a million things. But for our purposes today, I chose a couple of easy things that I felt would be in everybody's house. So I have some chopped nuts. Okay. I've got some sprinkles. Now, if you want to be hardcore, which usually I do like to be, you would go to Good Earth and get yourself some organic sprinkles. And I've got, what else do I have? I've got, oh, cocoa powder. Now this is the original topping for a truffle because that's how it got its name. You've seen a black truffle. It's actually a mushroom and it looks like a little black rock. And that's what chocolate truffles are mimicking, a little black mushroom truffle. So the original topping for that is just cocoa powder and it looks like a little black rock. So I got these. You could do coconut, you could do crushed up candy cane, you could just do anything. You know, the world is your oyster. You could melt some chocolate, either on a double boiler or in the microwave in stages. You just go like 30 seconds at a time and then stirs, 30 seconds and stir. And you can form these truffles and then use a skewer and dip them into the chocolate and then set that on parchment, and then you've got it like a hard coating to that, so you have a little snap and then the soft. And there's a million ways you can do this. One fun way to do this is with a melon baller. You just stick that right in, and then pull it out, and it's already kind of in a little ball of excellent proportion. And then you just roll it in your thing, and there you have a truffle. Ta-da! So, let's see. Let's do a couple of different toppings. I'm going to throw them in these little babies right here. It's always fun when you're making a Christmas tray. So let's say you have cookies and you have your caramels that you're going to put on there and you have your different things. Just putting a little paper liner around it just helps to make it festive and fun and really dresses it up. And people tend to think they're eating something a lot more special than they are. So, you know, it's perceived value. Okay, so here's my melon baller. Now, you don't have to use a melon baller. If you want to, you can just use a spoon and then just kind of roll them or shape them in your hands, just like that. And then you just roll them in whatever topping you want. Like I said, coconut is a great one. One time I had made a whole bunch of toffee and I had left over. So I just kept it and then crushed it up in a bag, like really tiny. And that makes a good topping for that. Hey, if somebody wants to impeccably wash their hands, they can come help me make some truffles. Do any of the kids want to do that?
Next time I'll bring gloves.
Yeah. Yeah. So good.
Do girls want to go to it?
Grab some sanitizer and do a double sanitize. And then just come and just roll truffles. Because the more minions I have making the truffles, the sooner you guys get to eat one. And that's what we all want, right?
What kind of nuts are those, walnuts?
Those are pecans. That's my favorite nut, is pecans, because it has so much flavor, and it doesn't make my mouth all like stingy like walnuts do. I don't know if anyone else has that problem, but I sure do. Okay. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you how to do is, well, actually, let's test our caramel and see where we're at. Oh, we're ready to put those into a thing. So, here we have our little squares. Throw that away real quick. Here we have our squares. And I just, literally, I didn't even measure because everybody is in a hurry, right? You don't have time to be so precise, unless you do have time to be precise, and then go for it. Perfectionism is great. So, but if you don't have time, you just take your caramel, you just cut whatever piece you can cut, take your caramel, roll it up, stick it in the center, roll it up like a little No, just kidding. And then take this end and twist. Take that end and twist. And there you have some candy.
They look like the baby Tootsie Rolls.
Yes. Yes, and it is just so easy to do, so easy to be fancy. Do I have other minions? Okay, girls. So you're going to take a scoop of this chocolate, and then you're going to roll it in whatever topping you like. Okay, you want to come around the front and be working on that? Are there any other minions who want to come work on caramels? Wash their hands impeccably, and then work on caramel. So basically, again, just roll up your caramel. Stick it in your paper. Roll that up. And twist. And you can twist in the same direction. You don't even have to go opposite directions. Twist to the right. Twist to the right. Obviously, you have to kind of gauge how big your paper needs to be in relation to the amount of caramel that you're putting into there. That will affect how well your twists will work. But yeah, it's as simple as that. Rick, you want to help me with caramel? Okay, so wash your hands. And just roll it up. Now, also, if you don't want it to be long shaped and you want it to be more of a thick shape in the center, just fold it over. As it's sitting in the parchment, it'll all meld together into one nice clump. So it won't look like it's been rolled or folded after a little while. And now it's fatter in the middle. Whoa! Dun, dun, dun! It's amazing how that happens. Good job. Now, because your hands are hot and chocolate melts with heat, you want to try to keep it in your hands for a very short time. So you put the chocolate in your hands and go roll, 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 and then stick it in the thing. Yes, good job though. And if you need to wipe your hands off, we have these. Okay, here's your squares. Go ahead and put that on. And while I've got my minions working for me, love it, we will start on the cookies. Now, obviously we don't have an oven at this facility, but I am just going to show you how to make the dough, all right? And it should be super simple. I picked a recipe that was way simple because I don't think that any goodies or sweets or cooking of any kind needs to be complicated to be delicious and to provide a bounty. For instance, these three things that you saw tonight, they're all really simple, but when you have them together on a platter at a Christmas party or at a family gathering, it looks really impressive and it looks really tasty. It's exciting to the eye, and it's also like 3 different fun flavors for the palate, right? And it's really not that hard to do. So these are, they have a lot of names. Some of them, they're Shenae Balls, they are snowball cakes or cookies. They are also Mexican wedding cakes. There's lots of different names for those. But essentially, it's a shortbread, a pecan shortbread that's rolled in powdered sweetener. Now, I don't use powdered sugar, but what I do use is powdered allulose, and sometimes I'll put erythritol in there or fructose in there. And I have a Blendtec blender, which I love, or if you have a Vitamix or any like high-end blender. And you just stick like 1.5 cups of your sweetener in there and just blend on high for about 36 seconds, and you have powdered sweetener. Ding! You don't have to go order a bunch of fancy stuff or pay $1 billion to get it. You just do it yourself in the blender.
What are you putting in the blender?
So I use allulose, and I use sometimes either xylitol or erythritol. It just depends on who I'm cooking for. Some people, they want, it's about low carb, right? And they don't want any like glycemic index. And so then I use like sweeteners that have 0 calorie effects, like xylitol and erythritol and monk fruit and stevia and all those things. But there are some tummies that don't do so well with those things. And so you have to take that into consideration too, and you ask them, so how do you do with like maltitol or erythritol? Are you gonna be on the toilet all day if I give you this? And if that's a problem, then you have to go back to other things like crystalline fructose or allulose. Okay? And allulose is hot on the market right now because it behaves a lot like sugar, but it is low glycemic and it's from natural sources. And it's not as refined, evidently.
And where do you get that?
You can get it at any specialty store, at any health food store. You can also get it online, which is the cheapest way to get it, like from Amazon. Okay, so to the cookies, Snowball Cookies. So in this bowl, I'm going to put all my dry ingredients, and then in this bowl, I'm going to cream my fat and my sweet. So we're going to start with 2.5 cups of flour, and in this case, I am using whole wheat pastry flour. Now, if somebody has an intolerance to gluten, this is easily made gluten-free. You're just going to use 1.5 cups of brown rice flour and a cup of tapioca flour and a little pinch of xanthan gum. It's as easy as that. You can always substitute if you need to. So we have 1 cup. We have 2 cups. Good job, lads. Good job. And we have another 1/2 cup. I'm going to eyeball that. There we go. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Then the next thing I'm going to put in is a cup of pecans that have been finely chopped or ground down. Now, there are a couple ways you can do this. I happen to have this gadget. I have had it for a bazillion years, as you can tell. It's an old Pampered Chef chopper that can get the nuts down to where they need to be. And basically, it rotates and chops, rotates, chops, da-da-da-da-da. And so you can get it down to this. The other thing you can do is just pulse it in your blender for just a few pulses. Do, 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 do. And be careful not to overdo it in the blender, because then you have nut butter. And if any of you have tried to do this before and gone too far, you know what I'm talking about. And actually, if it gets to that point, just embrace it and be like, okay, nut butter. Add a little oil and just keep going until it's smooth. Okay, so I'm putting a cup of this in there. You know, there are often mistakes we can make in the kitchen, but there is more than one way to skin a cat. There's no need to waste anything. Something can always turn into something. Unless, of course, it's charcoal. Then you do need to throw it out. Carcinogens are bad for you. Okay. And then we have 1/2 teaspoon salt. This salt is very important in this recipe. And the reason is because nuts, the flavor of nuts is just not unleashed unless you use a hefty amount of salt. Some things, their flavor just needs a hint of salt to come out. Like, for instance, like a mint flavoring, or like an orange flavoring, or even like a lemon flavoring, something like that. But nuts are one of those things that needs quite a bit of salt, which is why when you have unsalted roasted nuts for a snack, you're somehow not satisfied. Okay, so we have 1/2 teaspoon. Lovely. All right, next we are going to take our powdered sugar and our butter. So we have a whole cup of butter in here because it is a shortbread. And as you know, it's just fat and flour and sweet. That is what a shortbread is. There's no eggs in it. There's no other special ingredients. It's basically fat and sweet and flour. You need it to be nice and soft, but you do not need to microwave your butter in order to soften it. It's the easiest way and the quickest way probably, but you can also do it just by beating it. And some chefs would say that's the only way you should do it, is just by beating it. Because you don't want to risk it having like hot points and cold points. You know, like when you do it in the microwave and you have like a little pool of milk and then the other side's still hard, right? We've all been there. So I am going to beat this for a second. And it's literally just beating it up. And you want to get it until it's kind of smeared around the sides. And then you know it's soft enough to proceed.
So was it really hard to begin with, or just semi-hard?
It was pretty hard to begin with because, you know, the temperature in the room is not super high. And I took it out of the fridge when I came on my way to get here.
Okay.
So yeah, I would say that it was fairly firm. But now, look at this. So, let's see. I want to be able to show you here. It's pretty soft. You see that? I can drag it around, I can manipulate it. It's not just, the spatula isn't just like lumping over it. Okay. So it's fairly soft, so now I feel like I'm pretty safe to add my sweetener. And what I'm gonna add is a half a cup of powdered sweetener. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot. You're like, wow, a whole cup of butter, but only a half a cup of powdered sweetener. That's not gonna be very sweet. But remember that at the end of this recipe, we are rolling it in the sweetener. So you're double coating it with sweet. So you don't want to oversweeten the middle or else it'll just be like, whoa, sugary, right? So here we go, we're creaming this together. Cream, baby, cream. Now, every good baker knows you must stop and you must scrape the sides. It is essential. You may do that several times because they haven't invented a mixer yet. That has not just thrown things to the side and left the bottom to its own devices. We're almost there. I'm going to scrape it down one more time. Scrape, because I want it all incorporated. You don't want to have like all these butter lumps on the side and then like a bunch of non-incorporated powdered sugar on the bottom of the bowl. That defeats our purpose of combining them. So, scrape it down once more. Give it a go. Great. All right, and then the next thing you're going to add is your vanilla. And basically that's it. So, vanilla. It's a teaspoon, but I'm going to put...
That would look like a lot.
I'm going to put at least a tablespoon. I said I like vanilla. And I meant it. All right. And I think it really helps the flavor come through. With the pecans especially, it's such a great... And in fact, if you want to get really fun with flavor, especially when you're using pecans, throw in a little rum flavoring. It just complements really nicely with a pecan. Okay, so I've got that flavoring in there. And basically, I'm just going to whisk this up to combine it. No big deal, not that hard. Okay, and then I'm going to dump it in. Now here's the thing. If you are using flour with gluten, so that's going to be spelt, that's going to be wheat, that's going to be kamut, anything like that. You don't want to overmix, because if you do, you will get tough, chewy cookies, and you won't have nice, melty, crispy cookies. So you're going to just get this combined.
Have you ever done it with almond flour?
You know, I did once. I think I did a keto version where I did it with almond flour, but I had to add a little coconut flour to that because the almond flour alone doesn't work out. You have to add some coconut flour. But yeah, you can always adapt your recipe to any lifestyle need. That's why it's important to understand the fundamentals rather than just the recipe. Okay, so it's starting to combine here. And I'm trying to, as you can see, I'm trying to scrape off the attachment because lots of clumps of butter want to cling to that attachment. And I want my butter to go into the dough. So I'm going to turn it up just a little. And you just want to get it to the point to where you can see that it will hold together if a ball is formed. And now we are at our point. So I'm going to have you take a look. Now that looks very granular, right? It looks very dry. But when I grab it, together just perfectly. And I can roll it into a ball. See, just like that. And that's what you're going to do. So you're gonna roll it into 1 inch to 1.5 inch balls. You're gonna put it on your parchment and you're gonna bake it at 350 for about 12 minutes. You want it to be a little bit brown on the top, and then when you kind of tip it upwards, you want to see that it's golden on the bottom, but not too dark. And then, when it comes out of the oven and it's hot, you immediately throw it into a bowl of powdered sweetener and roll it around till it gets nicely coated. And then you're gonna leave those to cool completely. Don't serve them warm. It's not the same effect. It's not like a chocolate chip cookie where you're like, ooh, warm cookies and milk. You want them to be nice and cold because that's when they get like crisp and crumbling. Then, when you're ready to plate them and say put them in these little cups like we have, you will just take your little, some of you may have like a little shaker can or any little sieve, any fine sieve, and just sprinkle powdered sugar on the top, just to give that final little pretty snowball effect. And there you have it. So, just to review, we have our chocolate truffles, which look adorable. These really do look like little rocks. That's a true truffle, right there. And we have our mint caramels and we have our snowball cookies. I'm so happy that I was with you today. Does anyone have any questions for me before we wrap up?
What degrees did you put those at?
350.
And when you put them in something to coat them with the brown sugar,
With the
can you put it, powdered sugar,
Yeah.
can you put them in a bag and go like this, or will they fall apart?
When they're hot, there's a danger of them falling apart.
Okay.
So you just kind of gingerly roll them over a couple times and then just set them on your cooling rack or on a paper plate or something like that for them to cool. But yes, and you try not to handle them while they're hot, because what happens is your fingerprints take off a little section of like powdered sugar shell, and then you have like blotches on your
Yeah.
cookies, if that makes sense.
It does.
We've all been there. So yeah, any other questions?
Is the caramel hard to clean out of the bowl?
Out of the pot?
Out of the pan?
Yeah, out of the pot?
Not if you just fill your pot with water and let it sit there for like 15 minutes. And then it's a cinch. Then you just shh. It's not as, when you're using agave, it is not as sticky and clingy as sugar, because sugar actually wants to make a molecular bond with the side of the pot and wants to like bond with the pot. And so you have to melt it down to get it, or chisel it off to get it off. Not the case with this, because it is an invert sugar, so it's just not wanting to crystallize and melt with your pot. So it's super easy. Any other questions? I love these questions. Okay, awesome. Well, I hope you have a wonderful holiday, and I'm so glad you came to join me this evening, and hopefully I will see you again. And please come up and try some of these awesome truffles and some of these cookies and caramels. Thanks so much. We'll see you.
Thank you.